The rain hammered against the windows of our small apartment in Minneapolis, mirroring the storm raging inside me. Alaric, a 44-year-old IT specialist, had always considered myself a logical man, a man of systems and order. But the chaos that had erupted in my life defied all logic, all reason. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. My wife, Bronte, a vibrant and outgoing marketing manager, began to change. The easy laughter that once filled our home grew fainter, replaced by a strained silence. Her late nights at the office became more frequent, her explanations vague and unsatisfying. I chalked it up to work stress, the pressures of her demanding career. I was wrong. Bronte and I had been together for 15 years, married for 12. We'd met at a coffee shop downtown, both reaching for the same biscotti. It was a clique, I know, but it was our clique. We built a life together, a comfortable, predictable life. We weren't the most exciting couple, but we were happy, or so I thought. Looking back, the first real sign should have been the phone. Bronte had always been meticulous about her phone, but suddenly it was glued to her hand. Password protected, screen facing down, always taken with her, even to the bathroom. She'd jump if I even glanced in its direction. I tried to ignore it, telling myself I was being paranoid, insecure. But the feeling gnawed at me, a persistent, unsettling unease. One Saturday morning, Bronte told me she had a conference to attend out of state. "Chicago," she said. "It's a big one, Alaric, I have to be there." She packed her bags, kissed me goodbye, and promised to call that evening. But the call never came. I told myself she was busy, that the conference was taking up all her time. But as the hours ticked by, the feeling of unease intensified. I couldn't shake the image of her, alone in a hotel room, perhaps feeling as lost and confused as I was. That evening I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, my mind racing with possibilities, none of them good. I got up and went to the kitchen, hoping a glass of milk would calm my nerves. As I reached for the carton, I noticed Bronte's laptop sitting on the kitchen counter. She never left her laptop out in the open. It was always locked away in her home office. Curiosity, or perhaps a morbid sense of self-destruction, got the better of me. I opened the laptop. It was still logged into her email account. My heart pounded in my chest as I scrolled through her inbox. There were dozens of emails from an unknown sender, each one filled with a sickeningly sweet affection. "My dearest Bronte," one email began, "I can't wait to see you in Chicago. I'm counting down the minutes until I can hold you in my arms again." The blood drained from my face. My hands trembled as I read on, each word a dagger twisting in my gut. The emails were explicit, passionate, and undeniably proof of an affair. The sender's name was listed as Klaus. I didn't know a Klaus. I sank into a chair, the laptop slipping from my grasp and landing on the floor with a thud. The reality of the situation crashed down on me, a tidal wave of disbelief and pain. Bronte, my wife, the woman I loved, was having an affair with someone named Klaus. In Chicago, not at a conference. The world seemed to tilt on its axis, the familiar landscape of my life suddenly foreign and hostile. I felt a surge of anger, hot and consuming. I wanted to scream, to break things, to lash out at someone, anyone. But beneath the anger was a deeper, more profound sadness. A sense of loss so profound it felt like a part of me had died. I spent the rest of the night in a daze, rereading the emails, searching for some explanation, some justification. But there was none. Only betrayal, lies, and a gaping hole where my heart used to be. The next morning, Bronte called. "How are you, honey?" she asked, her voice bright and cheerful. "The conference is going great. I'll be home on Sunday." I managed to choke out a few words, pretending everything was normal. But inside, I was crumbling. I knew I couldn't confront her over the phone. I needed to see her face, to hear her explanation, to understand how she could do this to me. But I also knew I couldn't wait until Sunday. The thought of her spending another night with Klaus, of her lying in his arms, was unbearable. I made a decision. I was going to Chicago. I booked a flight for that afternoon, packed a bag, and left a note for Bronte. "I know," it read. "I'll see you soon." The flight to Chicago was the longest of my life. Every mile felt like an eternity, every thought a fresh wave of pain. I replayed our entire relationship in my mind, searching for clues, for signs I had missed. Had I been blind? Had I been so caught up in my own world that I hadn't noticed her unhappiness? Or was she simply a master manipulator capable of hiding her true feelings from me for years? When I arrived in Chicago, I took a taxi to the hotel Bronte had mentioned. I walked into the lobby, my heart pounding in my chest. I asked the receptionist for Bronte's room number. She hesitated, but after a bit of persuasion, she relented. Room 308. I took the elevator to the third floor, my hands clammy, my legs weak. I stood outside the door, listening for any sound from within. Silence. I raised my hand and knocked. The door opened a crack. Bronte stood there, her eyes wide with surprise. "Alaric," she stammered. "What are you doing here?" Before she could say another word, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of perfume and something else, something I couldn't quite place. And then I saw him, Klaus. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, wearing only a bathrobe, his face a mask of shock and embarrassment. He was younger than me, fitter, with a smug look that I instantly wanted to wipe off his face. "Who is this?" he asked, his voice dripping with arrogance. "This is my husband," Bronte said, her voice barely a whisper. The silence that followed was deafening. I stared at them, my mind struggling to process the scene before me. Bronte, my wife, in a hotel room with another man. The reality of the situation hit me with full force, and something inside me snapped. "What is going on here, Bronte?" I asked, my voice trembling with rage. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and defiance. "It's not what you think," she said, the words sounding hollow and unconvincing. "Oh, really?" I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Because it looks an awful lot like my wife is having an affair with this. I couldn't even bring myself to call him a man." "His name is Klaus," Bronte said, her voice still barely audible. "And yes, we're having an affair." Her words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I felt a surge of anger so intense it threatened to consume me. I wanted to hurt them, to make them feel the pain I was feeling. But I knew that violence wouldn't solve anything. It would only make things worse. I took a deep breath, trying to regain control of my emotions. "Why, Bronte?" I asked, my voice softer now, filled with a desperate plea for understanding. "Why would you do this to me, to us?" She looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. "I don't know," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. I wasn't happy. I felt like we were stuck in a rut. I needed something more." "More," I repeated, my voice rising again. "More than what?" "More than a loving husband, a comfortable home, a stable life." "What more could you possibly want?" She didn't answer. She just stood there, her head bowed, her shoulders shaking with sobs. I turned to Klaus, my eyes filled with contempt. "And you," I said, my voice dripping with venom. "You knew she was married. You knew you were breaking up a family. How could you do this?" He shrugged, his face devoid of any remorse. "She wanted me," he said, his voice smug. "And I wanted her. It's that simple." I stared at him, my disgust growing with each passing second. He was nothing but a parasite, preying on vulnerable women, destroying lives for his own selfish pleasure. I knew then that there was no saving our marriage. The trust was broken, the love was gone. All that was left was anger, resentment, and a profound sense of betrayal. I turned to Bronte, my eyes filled with a cold, hard resolve. "I'm done," I said, my voice flat and emotionless. "I'm filing for divorce. I want you out of my life." She looked at me, her eyes filled with panic. "Alaric, please," she begged. "Don't do this. We can work through this, I promise." I shook my head, my resolve unwavering. "It's too late, Bronte," I said. "You've crossed a line, there's no going back." I turned and walked out of the hotel room, leaving Bronte and Klaus to their guilt and their shame. I didn't look back. I didn't shed a tear. I just walked away, knowing that my life would never be the same again. The divorce was messy and acrimonious. Bronte fought me every step of the way, trying to get as much money as possible. She even tried to claim that I was abusive, that I had driven her into the arms of another man. But I had proof of her affair, and the judge wasn't sympathetic to her lies. In the end, I got everything I wanted. The house, the car, the majority of our savings. Bronte was left with nothing but her clothes, her car, and her lover. But even with the divorce finalized, the pain lingered. I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal, the sense that I had been a fool, a dupe. I spent months in a state of depression, unable to eat, unable to sleep, unable to function. I lost my job, my friends, my sense of purpose. I was a shell of my former self, a broken man haunted by the ghost of a failed marriage. One day I was scrolling through social media when I came across a picture of Bronte and Klaus. They were on vacation in Mexico, looking happy and carefree. The sight of them together, flaunting their happiness in my face, sent a jolt of anger through me. I realized then that I couldn't let them win. I couldn't let them destroy my life. I needed to move on, to rebuild, to find happiness again. It wouldn't be easy, but I knew I had to try. I started by focusing on myself. I joined a gym, started eating healthy, and began seeing a therapist. I reconnected with old friends, made new ones, and started exploring new hobbies. I took a painting class, joined a hiking club, and even tried online dating. It was slow going, but gradually I started to feel like myself again. The pain didn't disappear completely, but it became more manageable, less all-consuming. One evening I was at a local bar, enjoying a drink with a friend, when I saw Klaus walk in. He was alone, looking haggard and worn. He spotted me and hesitated, his face turning pale. I motioned him over to our table. He approached cautiously, his eyes filled with apprehension. "Alaric," he said, his voice barely audible. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Have a seat, Klaus," I said, my voice calm and controlled. He sat down, looking uncomfortable and out of place. "What do you want?" he asked, his eyes darting around the room. "I just want to talk," I said. "I want to understand why you did what you did." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's complicated," he said. "Bronte and we had a connection. I don't know how else to explain it." "A connection?" I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You call sleeping with a married woman a connection?" He looked down, his face flushed with shame. "I know it was wrong," he said, "but I couldn't help myself. She was irresistible." I stared at him, my anger slowly dissipating. I realized that he was just as much a victim as I was. Bronte had manipulated him, used him, and then discarded him when she was done. "Where is she now?" I asked. He shrugged. "She left me," he said. "A few months ago. Said she was bored, that she needed something new." I felt a pang of satisfaction, knowing that karma had finally caught up with her. "She's like that," I said, "always chasing the next thrill, the next adventure. She'll never be happy." We sat in silence for a few minutes, both of us lost in our own thoughts. Then I stood up, extending my hand to Klaus. "I don't forgive you," I said, "but I understand. You were a pawn in her game, just like I was." He took my hand, his grip firm. "Thank you," he said, "for understanding." I walked away, leaving Klaus alone at the bar. I didn't feel any sense of triumph or vindication, just a quiet sense of closure. I had finally come to terms with what had happened. I had forgiven myself for being a fool, and I had moved on with my life. A few years later, I met someone new. Her name was Imogen, and she was everything Bronte wasn't: kind, compassionate, and honest. We fell in love, got married, and built a life together. A life based on trust, respect, and mutual understanding. I finally found the happiness I had been searching for, the happiness that Bronte had denied me. Bronte, on the other hand, continued her downward spiral. She bounced from one relationship to another, each one ending in disaster. She lost her job, her friends, and eventually her self-respect. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she was living in a small apartment, working as a waitress, and struggling to make ends meet. I felt a twinge of pity for her, but I didn't regret my decision to leave her. She had made her choices, and she had to live with the consequences. My story is a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the most seemingly perfect relationships can crumble under the weight of betrayal. But it's also a story of hope, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Even after the most devastating heartbreak, it's possible to heal, to rebuild, and to find happiness again. It's not easy, but it's worth it. Because in the end, the only person you can truly rely on is yourself.